The Spinoff Podcast Network.
This is Kiwi is back for a brand new season with more inspiring kōrero from special guests, including lead actor of global Netflix series Three Body Problem, Jess Hong.
I've got into places where I never even imagined.
And full-time Kiwi travellers and digital nomads, Dane and Stacey. What's a common misconception that people have about you and what you do?
That content creation isn't a job.
Listen to the new season of This is Kiwi, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in collaboration with KiwiBank. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
There are many reasons why you might invest in a Fisher Funds managed fund, whether it's for the grandkids, your retirement, or that investment property. Whatever your reason, a managed fund is a smart and flexible way to help you achieve your ambitions. Take the first step. Visit our website or call us to speak with an expert advisor today. Fisher Funds Management Limited is the issuer of Fisher Funds Managed Funds. A product disclosure statement for the scheme can be found at fisherfunds.co.nz.
It was this 1880s or something seafarers building, and it was built at a time when the average human was like 5 foot tall. And so the balustrade on the stairs is sort of like...
check that later.
was like mid-thigh high for most of us.
This week, 10 years ago, a website was launched. It was a TV blog dedicated to the most prestige and the most comforting of shows, and it had two writers on staff, founder Duncan Grieve and film critic Alex Casey. The first article ever published by the Spinoff.co.nz was about the return of Full House. Today, that website has an editorial team of 20, with writers and editors in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin. We have podcasts, like this one, video series and live events. The Spinoff 10 years on looks quite different from the little TV blog that launched in September 2014. But some names persist. Alex and Duncan join me today with editor-at-large Toby Manhire to take a brisk walk through a decade of the Spinoff. Here's Alex Casey, Duncan Grieve and Toby Manhire on Behind the Story. Duncan, the Spinoff was born on September 10, 2014. When was it actually conceived in your brain?
I actually tell this story in the essay, but it had quite a complicated conception, largely because I originally pitched it to Lightbox, which was our sort of founding sponsor, as it turned out, as something that should sit on or next to their platform, kind of wholly owned. You know, I was already kind of sus about algorithms and thought, you know, we should have people picking the shows and saying why they're good. That could be a point of difference for Lightbox from Netflix, which hadn't even launched in New Zealand yet. Pitched the idea, they liked it, went along for months kind of setting it up, and I, you know, as I said in the piece, I was like, I'm a consultant now, and thought I was real fancy. And then sometime in June or July, they sort of made its way to legal, and they said, oh, you just can't do this. And again, that's in the story as well. But their solution was, we can't do this, but we can sponsor it, and you can do it. And after I kind of got over myself, which did take a while, and I'm not proud of my behaviour in that period, suddenly it was like, oh, this is exciting. And I think I was already in touch with Alex then, but it basically was, it all happened between kind of March and September, but it was a sort of a very halting and not particularly orderly process.
So you're already in touch with Alex. Alex, do you remember Duncan getting in touch with you?
I have the receipts right here, Mad. Thank you. It was Friday the 13th, June 2014, when you first tweeted at me asking if I could follow you so you could send me a message.
So quaint.
Does that still exist on the World Wide Web?
No, the tweet is unfortunately gone, I think, with both our Twitter accounts being flushed down the loo. But I think not long after that, I was working as a projectionist at the time, deeply depressed, really like this was quite a huge opportunity potentially. A strange man in my DMs. You got to jump on those opportunities. So I replied immediately, and then you sent me an email. You said, "Hi Alex, thanks for replying to my cool tweet. I really, really love your work for Flix, and I was wondering whether you watch TV at all. If so, I might have some writing for you. I'd need to get you to sign an NDA before I can expand upon that is all. But if you're intrigued enough by the minimal information above, maybe we could have coffee sometime next week and I can tell you what I'm plotting. Cheers, Duncan." NDA. I didn't even know what that meant. I was 23. I was just like, okay.
Straight out of Compton? What is this?
Yeah.
Did you sign it?
I must have, because you do bring up the NDA quite a lot in these early emails.
That is quite self-important, Duncan. Talk us through it.
Who drafted this NDA?
Oh, this would have come from Spark.
It was about Lightbox,
okay.
right? It was because,
You're forgiven.
This is the thing as well at the time. Lightbox, like Netflix wasn't in New Zealand yet. Lightbox was a huge moment. Is that right? Like that's why there was so much secrecy around it. It wasn't about, correct me if I'm wrong,
the
TV
spin-off or Unboxed, as it was known, working title. But yeah, no, absolutely. Like it was because the idea of subscription, like paid streaming of TV and movies was foreign to New Zealand at the time. And this was a massive, I don't know the total budget of Lightbox, but I'm guessing it was 8 figures plus. Like it was a huge investment for one of New Zealand's biggest companies. Yes, it was brought them face to face with Netflix, but it also brought them up against Sky. Like it was a big business deal, it was a big cultural deal, and we were just two kind of idiots just floating around the end. But they were sort of. I was trying to look like a serious person to this big corporation, so when they gave me an NDA, I was like, I really need to do this.
So basically, what you're saying is the spin-off. I mean, it's in the name, but the spin-off did not start as a current affairs, sometimes news site. It was like I think this is what a lot of readers now, if they go, "Oh, can't believe you're writing about TV," and it's like, it's called the spin-off.
Yeah.
It's pretty specific, reference.
Reality TV filled the spin-off early on, just purely out of kind of function, because there was 5 episodes of My Kitchen Rules on a week. I was the only writer for the website, and we needed to fill it with something. So I started recapping.
But that wasn't on Lightbox, was it? It
wasn't on Lightbox. So we had some sort of split, right? That we would do a certain amount of Lightbox shows per week, and then kind of New Zealand coverage outside of that. Yeah,
I mean that's where it wasn't really some great master plan. We were, when it was going to be part of Lightbox, we were only going to write about Lightbox shows. It was a contract writing gig, essentially. When it became our own thing, you couldn't rely on traffic coming through the platform. You had to generate your own, and you couldn't very well run a platform that was just about this one very new, relatively narrow place to watch TV. So we asked and received permission to write about all of New Zealand television, and that split between some content which you create to pay the bills, and some content which you do to kind of bring people in the door. It's not really all that different to the way we are now, but it was that kind of small insight that birthed the whole thing in a way.
It was also at that time, like live tweeting, reality shows was still quite a massive thing in New Zealand. Like X Factor was,
enormous.
That was huge. The Block was, the Block's always massive, but the Block was big. So there was a real energy around reality TV, and no one else was writing about it at all in the country. So I think that also kind of helped to, break us through early on.
Yeah, like the TV writing culture at the time was very much what had been happening in newspapers and magazines for like decades prior, which was once a week you would write a review of a show, and that would be it. And unless there was some crazy news event, and that was new. So the idea of recapping or blogging on a daily basis, which is now kind of routine, we did sort of pioneer that in a local context. And again, it was a sort of a needs must thing that really did help differentiate us and plug us into the culture.
This all, obviously it started a lot smaller, but it's still a big thing to launch a website. Alex, do you want to very quickly take us through that first day? What was it like? You go in the office, you shake hands with Duncan, you have a
pop champagne,
piece of cake together. What went down?
So I was hunched over an old primary school desk in my flat in Ponsonby in my pajamas for the entire day, while Duncan was on a flight to Spain.
This is a true fact.
For some reason, which I'm sure you're welcome to speak to, Duncan decided to leave the country on the first day of the spin-off and didn't come back until... So it was September 10th to October 6th was that holiday. So I was alone, but I was in communication with you the entire time from Spain about what the website would be.
So my parents lived in Spain. This was one of those long booked holidays, which initially was just sort of floating the distance and didn't mean a whole lot. And then in a beautiful cosmic kind of shitstorm, it just kind of meant that floated along to the point where I think Lightbox had launched maybe a week prior. And we came, when we were just like, we have to get going because they're going and we've got to start getting eyes on them. And it just, like, ridiculously, I remember sending the tweet and then basically turning off my phone and getting on a plane. And I mean, everything about it, with hindsight is like ridiculous and hilarious. And I'm so indebted to you, Alex, not just for being this brilliant writer that kind of helped define our brand and has ever since, but also for being just, that's fine. You go on a plane and I'll just work in my pajamas and that's sort of fine.
Well, I didn't know what this was going to be. I was at that period where, I was just picking up random little contract social media writer, and I was like, oh yeah, this would be a funny joke I did for 3 months and then it'll fizzle out. I think if I had known we'd still be here, I would have felt a lot more daunted by that opportunity back then.
So, Toby, while this is all happening, where are you in September 2014?
I'm in Auckland, and I'm writing, I think, for the Listener and the Herald, and I had some contracts with the Guardian. I was happily freelancing, living a happy life in my Auckland suburb. It was like, although I was thinking back on it, it was a bit like lockdown before lockdown, freelancing from your suburban home. And then,
you were doing pub quizzes, right? I feel like you were famous for those.
Yeah, we did pub quiz. We did a kind of boutique pub quiz down the road, which was often sold out, owing to the fact that there were like 4 tables to fill.
I love these manic pixie pre-spin-off jobs. Like I was a projectionist, just waiting for my big break.
Right.
You were slumming it at the pub quizzes.
It's a bit on the nose. Yes. I was a projectionist.
The writing has always been a bit ropey of the spin-off story.
So when did you hear from Duncan? Like at what point were you sort of brought into the loop, which is essentially when the spin-off moved beyond TV or pop culture?
I'd written a couple of pieces for the spin-off. Went on the thick of it and maybe something else. Anyway, and I had talked to Duncan on and off about, nerdy media things. Didn't know Alex at the time. Didn't realise that Alex was actually the one doing all the work. That became clear later. But I ended up having a conversation with Duncan on a cafe somewhere, and he explained his thinking, and I thought, that sounds exciting. That sounds really interesting. I think I popped into the office a few times and craving human company.
When you say office now, is this when we were squatting in someone else's office on K Road?
No, I never went into that office when you were there. No, this is down on Custom Street. Ah. But Duncan explained his idea to me, and I thought, that sounds cool. And it's like, he wants to start, I went to, I think this sounds exciting. He wants to start a separate sort of politics site. And so I agreed to it and thought that'll be interesting. And then later he said, oh, no, it's going to be the spin-off. I went, surely not. Surely not.
He was like, I would like some distance, please.
But it was too late by then, and the rest is history.
So was this all leading up to the relaunch in 2015 on the 1-year birthday?
Yeah, so it's, if you kind of look at how much happened between sort of March and September 2015, it's actually kind of unimaginable because we, it was pitching a bunch of writers for coming on board. It was finding enough sponsors to sustain that. It was doing some kind of off-platform commercial work as well. And I was also writing Dan Carter's autobiography at the time. And so Alex heroically kind of picked up, basically just held the site while I just did all this other stuff and contributed pretty poorly and pretty occasionally. But and we leased an office, cleared out the office, painted the office, subleased the office. It was just like this phenomenal amount of work. But it, by the end of it, on September 10th, 2015, we flicked the switch, and the Spinoff as we know it now, not in terms of look or scope, or the fully fleshed out scope that it has now, but certainly it's not radically different. Like, we were already podcasting, we already had some video content, we already had social channels, and we would have I think we had 8 or 9 people working part or full time, and it just sort of happened in that period and then on that day.
And there's quite like I think there's a particular spin-off approach to things. And I think some of it was out of necessity of just being small and I guess scrappy. Was there a certain point where it was like, oh, this is a thing now. This is like, we can't ever not be, I don't know, a little bit funny or a little bit chaos, or was there did you have ambitions of it becoming this kind of fully formed, I don't know, media empire, or was it always meant to be small?
I think I was really ambitious about it and thought that it had huge potential from very early on. I also think that it's impossible to overstate Alex's influence in those kind of on the way it developed, because she had such a strong sense of humor and this kind of very a brilliantly informal writing style, that kind of, I felt like for audiences, but also for other writers, that sort of made space for them who might not have seen themselves writing for the Herald or Stuff or something. It made sense on the Spinoff, and it really differentiated us. So for a commercial partner, they were like, the Spinoff is over here, and there's nothing else really like it. And then also as soon as we kind of had that little group, it felt like it was almost like competitive sport. And, you joined not long after that. I think you sent that first email, Mad. People sort of seemed to have this sort of sense of trying to kind of not outdo one another, but because everyone was rooting for one another. But there was this sense of the creativity of how can you break this format or this paradigm, or pull this thing from this style of coverage and put it over here. That was just really in us all at the time, and that wasn't my natural sort of approach. It was a huge amount of Alex, and then it was the people who came along and kind of fed off that, I think.
There's also a lot of us weren't news reporters or even trained journalists,
there weren't a lot of journalism qualifications in the office.
And there was also still the blogosphere was still pretty strong at that point. And I think that really contributed to that tone. We were just talking about that this morning, of even reading those early pieces, just how informal and just chilled out on a couch some of that writing is. We're just like, you've joined us. And I think possibly it was also because we were writing no one was watching, because they weren't. We did pre-cook quite a few pieces before we went live on September 10th. And, those were just literally screaming into the void. And I don't know what the numbers were like on the first day, but I can't imagine it was more than 1,000 people.
I mean, that's a really good point. And I mentioned this in the essay. This idea that, and I used to say this, was that this could all blow away in a strong breeze. Like, we were here for a good time, but no one had any. It wasn't plausible to assume that it would last. And I think that sense of liberation, it provided a sense of liberation because you were just like, you didn't have a huge audience. There wasn't a lot of money. There was no good reason to believe that, we had a rolling 3-month lease, and even that felt like a big commitment. There was no good reason to think that this was going to become what it did, and that's actually paradoxically why it did, because it allowed us to just be a lot more kind of free and easy with it, I think.
Toby, you came on board as the politics editor, and then in 2018 you took over as the editor. Obviously, coming from the Queen's Guardian and the Herald and the Listener, those are very different publications to the Spinoff. When you took over as editor, was there anything that you were kind of like, all right, I'm keen to kind of either add this to the stable, or, because they're quite different beasts, essentially?
I mean, I think if we're honest, I'd probably been kind of editing the Spinoff to a certain degree even before then, and that we'd had the 2017 election. And while there were parts of it that I wasn't across, I mean, and Duncan was very focused a lot of the time through appetite or necessity on the business side. We didn't have a commercial team barely at all. And so Duncan was doing quite a lot of hustling, on some occasions to keep it going and to meet payroll and sometimes to expand and build new sections. And I had the experience of editing a desk, of having people I'm commissioning, having a bunch of people that you had to corral together. So I had that experience. And so I probably lent some of that to the machine, but while at the same time vampirically feeding off the energy of these interesting, cool young people. So I don't think, to get to your question properly, that I came in with a particular agenda or vision. It was always a kind of growth process. And because hopefully, I mean, Alex might say differently, I don't think it hopefully felt like a massive sort of shift in focus at any point, so much as
I'm just trying to remember when we started having Monday editorial meetings, which I would think probably came alarmingly late in the journey of the Spinoff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, Mad, because you joined it in start of 2016, is that correct? So we've been going for about 18 months. Clearly there was something from the outside. There's that amazing line in your email to me about you'd been thinking about pursuing a career in comedy or journalism, and thought with the Spinoff you could found that you could do both. I'm paraphrasing. I'm just wondering, what it was like for you to kind of walk into that office, and because that's we were all sort of there, and you were sort of fresh eyes on it.
I mean, that was my first 9-to-5 job, certainly first time working in an office. And I was a zero onboarding. So I think for about the first 3 weeks, I was sort of like, at what point do I ask to be shown how to put a piece together in the back end? Or I think Alex sent me an email on the second week being like, I'm so sorry for asking you to do a piece of work, but here's something I need help with. There were a lot of times because I had read some stupid thing about if you want to be noticed, be the last one to leave the office or something. Except that was for a big office, not one where everyone can literally see you at every second of the day. And so sometimes I would just sit there and have nothing to do and then leave at 6 o'clock, even though I had nothing to do. Because it was just kind of well, I can't leave right on 5 because then it's super obvious that I'm not doing anything. So no, it was one of those things where it felt like everybody knew exactly what they were doing and hadn't quite got to the point of needing to tell other people to do stuff. And so when I got there, I was like, everything you're talking about, I don't really know anything about that. And I think, so then I was like, I'll review a show about renovating houses with your parents, because that's literally what I was doing. And, I was like, that's very specifically something I can write about. And then went from there. But it did feel, I remember after I stayed on, which I had my 6-week internship, and I lived in Wellington technically, and I think it wasn't until halfway through the 6th week that you were like, oh, would you like to stay on? And I was like, oh, yes, please. And you were like, I assumed you knew that. And I was like, why would I know that? So that was how it worked. But I did feel at the end of it going, especially as other people came in as well, kind of going, oh, you kind of have to come in and want to write about things, because it's not like you show up and then someone's like, okay, do this, this, and this, and you just kind of follow instructions all day. There is, for better, mostly for better, but sometimes for worse, a sense of you should want to write stuff and then just write it. So it took maybe a week to figure that out, and then we were good.
When did the Onzo bike ride to Huntley arrive in your in your brain?
That's
was
late.
that deep?
That's
I thought you were an intern.
it was
you did that.
it was The Rock.
The Rock was that. Yeah, that was really close to the
Tell
start.
us about The Rock.
That was when I was literally an intern, because I had written about the TV show, and I was like, great, I've got a story done, so that's good. And then I had no other story ideas, so I was like, what can I do? And for some reason, that somebody posted The Rock alarm system that wakes you up at 4 a.m. because that's when The Rock wakes up. And it was sort of like, that would be funny, and no one wanted to do it. And I was like, okay, I suppose I could do that.
Well, you say no one wanted to do it, like we were sort of tossing around the idea. No one considered doing it.
So that's the first item on the Monday editorial meeting.
Is anybody else going to volunteer to live like The Rock? Looks like it's me.
But then I saw, and then I Googled it and saw that someone else had been like, oh, I got the Rock app and woke up at 4:15 every morning, and my life is not any better or something. And then the Rock had replied being like, that's because you didn't do all my workouts and this and this. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I do the wake up at 4 a.m. and do the workouts. But that is also a thing where, I guess I was an intern. I suppose if an intern pitched that now, I would say sure. But
I did that in 2017.
But I literally did nothing that whole week except wake up at 4:15, go to the gym for 2 hours, and then go to the gym again, and then show up quite late to work by the time I did that stuff, and then kind of fall asleep at my desk.
Yeah, you did fall asleep a lot.
And then go home, which the end piece did really well, so it's kind of I don't know, maybe it was worth it. But it is kind of crazy now to think it was like, guys, sorry, I'm being The Rock this week.
We're like, oh, of course.
So don't talk to me.
Was that the time? I remember at a certain point I would kind of visit Lightbox each week, and we would liaise about their big shows coming out, and we'd talk about our stories, and you came along with me and you fell asleep in the foyer of the Spark building.
Yeah, that might have been.
Not in the meeting.
Not in the meeting. Not in the meeting. But I was like,
just while I was waiting.
I've got a meeting to go to now.
Mad falling asleep places. I mean, it's not quite...
Not something for you to really harp about, Duncan.
Yeah, well, there's a number of us. Simon Day also had some classic fall asleeps. But when you were writing Stephen Adams' biography, I feel like I would come in most mornings and you were asleep on a couch.
Yeah, I tried to do it so that I would sleep. I had some absolutely cursed showers in that shower.
Oh, I didn't even know that shower worked.
It does. Oh. But it was like, if you have a shower at night in that shower, you're basically showering in the dark because there was no light in that room.
Yeah.
So you were relying on just the light from
Britomart
clubs or something shining through the window.
Actually, though.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, it was quite a. It was like a chaos vibe in a way that I was like, oh, so this is what an office is like. And then after I left, I was like, okay, no, that wasn't. That's not what an office is like at all.
This month, the Spinoff turns 10, and we'll be partying all week long with special content, chats, articles, and games. Plus, a competition with some very Spinoff prizes. We are known for our rankings, but which one is the best? Hera Lindsay Bird has been tasked with finding out. She's ranking our rankings. And for the first time ever, you get to have a say. Tell us what you think, and you'll go in the draw to win a mega hamper of goods ranked by the Spinoff. There are spot prizes too. Rank our rankings now at thespinoff.co.nz. Rā whānau ki a the Spinoff, and here's to many more.
We started doing a pepeha.
I don't know where I'm from. Yeah, I'm gonna go check with the chef.
Takeout Kids, a coming-of-age documentary series, returns for Season 2. From a Thai restaurant to a dairy to a nail salon, 5 young people balance school and relationships while growing up in their families' shops.
Are you working tomorrow?
I go to school.
Watch Takeout Kids on the Spinoff today, made with the support of New Zealand On Air.
It's interesting, right? Like, there was a real kind of raised by wolves quality to it. Like, you know, I'm not trying to forgive myself here, but I'd never managed anyone or had a direct report prior to that myself. So I didn't really know how it was supposed to be either. You know, like, we got an office, and the office was, with hindsight, not really a place that you should allow people to work. Even just getting up the stairs, so dangerous, because it was this 1880s or something seafarers building, and it was built at a time when the average human was like 5 foot tall, and so the balustrade on the stairs was sort of like
check that later.
was like mid thigh high for most of us, and I was just like, we used to drink up there, man. I'm like, it's kind of amazing that no one just like had a wobble and.
Oh
You know,
my God.
with hindsight, it's terrifing.
The one toilet as well for like so many people.
Well, except for one
Take this
person.
opportunity to apologise to New Zealand Geographic once again.
Yeah. But when we moved in, I remember you like taking me through the space, and there was like a dirty mattress on the floor.
Oh, yeah. That
And
wasn't
like
from
a
me, to be clear.
blender, like
That
a
was-
blender on the floor without a lid, and like just really scary stuff.
It was so scary. It had been abandoned by the previous tenant, but someone had been living there, on or off the books.
It was me.
And we had to get rid of all the stuff. But, you know, we operated there from 2015 through to 2018. So, you know, like for a good chunk of our growing up. And by the time we moved out into a flash, newly renovated office with a custom-built podcast studio. So it is kind of crazy to think of like the way we came in and the way we left. But just how much affection I feel for that definitely cursed office because of what it allowed us to grow into.
I would say it was a very specific workplace and probably sensibility, and also meant that people probably would either love it or hate it. If you just sort of cycled through different journalists and writers coming in, you know, Simon Wilson, he of the Herald, he came in, absolutely loved it. He gave a very, very lovely farewell speech when he left, but I think in a
He
kind
loved
of
it so much he left.
Well, you and Simon had a very sweet relationship, which kind of reached its apotheosis with the Grove KFC stories. Can you talk about that relationship and those stories? Because I find that still, it only gets cuter all the time. It's like, it's a fine wine, honestly.
Simon, I did not know who Simon was. I did not know who anyone was in New Zealand media. So I also did not know who Simon was. But people in the office had kind of been like, whoa, Simon Wilson's coming to work at the Spinoff for a bit. And it was kind of like it was
a bit of a moment.
Yeah, that's like quite a big get. And then he came in, and for some reason, just as soon as he kind of acted a little bit fancy, I just loved it straight away. Like, anytime I offered him chips on a Friday, the look that he would give me for suggesting that he would eat potato chips was just so funny. Or like if I just like went to the dairy, because I went to the dairy all the time. If I went to the dairy and came back with some snacks and like offered them around, he'd be like, no.
For the few listeners not familiar with the curriculum vitae of Simon Wilson, he'd been the editor of Cuisine for some years, and then Metro. So his
palate was
very fine.
And we were such little shits. I feel like we'd like take photos of him like all the time at his desk. There's one where he did
delicately holding a piece
right.
of brownie or something.
Yeah, a piece of birthday cake on his fingertips. Like it's so amazing.
It was so good. And like I remember because we would just get like, I don't know where we went for lunch because I definitely wasn't making my own lunch. But then one day he came back with like this quite fancy looking sandwich, and I was like, where did you get that sandwich? And he was like, oh, I got it at Amano, which is like a fancy restaurant across the way. And I was like, oh my God. And for some reason I just assumed that sandwich must be like $45 or something. So I was like, oh, that's okay. It's like, that's not for me. And he was like, it's cheaper than those burgers you're always getting. It was just like, he was really, I think it was a nice balance. And I think it's that thing where it's like, if I had gone to a like the Herald or something, I feel like I would have been like very overwhelmed by the seriousness
and the hierarchy,
journalists.
right?
Yeah.
As well. Like I think that it did feel weirdly non-hierarchical, very flat. Like I don't think there was any sort of management at all. Apologies again.
But yeah, so I think we've had various people work at the Spinoff, and I would say the vast majority had a really great time. But in terms of recruiting, because you've all been involved, and so have I, in recruiting for the Spinoff and trying to find either freelance contributors or more kind of high stakes, permanent writers for staff, was there anything that you kind of maybe realised after a while or straight away that was like, oh, this is kind of a non-negotiable for someone working here, or like even someone who might be like an excellent at this thing or a really good writer maybe won't, it's not as black and white as just read a piece of writing and that's it. Or is it?
Toby, do you want to speak to that? You and I did a lot of recruiting together for a period of time.
Toby's like, did I hire anyone?
I don't want to take responsibility.
I don't know. I don't know if this is the correct answer, but I suppose we wanted people who had a particular sense of humour or sensibility whereby you could appreciate that we could do things which we talked about. Sometimes we would do the high and the low. So in that way, you're right that we would occasionally over the years as time ticked on get people complaining about us covering reality television, where that was actually the nucleus of what we did and not just an accident. In fact, that informed everything from my point of view. When I joined, we wanted to do things that we could write intelligent, funny, interesting, curious words about things that were considered lowbrow, and we could write silly things about things that were considered highbrow. And that was sort of part of the kind of the motor for what we did. And so the people that we looked to hire were people who kind of almost innately had that approach to the world.
Alex, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess voiciness. I was going back through our emails and I found a pitch from someone in the first week that was about, it was kind of like 7 dumb things that 7 Sharp did this week. And it was me and you going back and forth about that. And I think it was also about like who's the target and how obvious is it? Like we didn't want to be obvious, I think, in kind of many different ways, especially in the early days, but I think that continued. And we decided not to run that because we were like, well, that's just so, it's such low-hanging fruit. We wanted to be, like surprise people by doing something perhaps thoughtful about reality TV, or even defend 7 Sharp, or defend, things that had kind of become a punching bag a little bit in New Zealand culture.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like there was just sort of an accepted I think this is where, again, that you and then the rest of the team started to kind of, there was an accepted critical approach, and there were just these truisms like Shortland Street is bad, reality TV is contemptuous, drama is important, and we came in with this sort of little shit attitude and kind of blew all that up. And so, and I think that's why, going back to that idea of the non-journalist or people without a journalism background, we looked for people who were great writers. We didn't even really know whether they were qualified as journalists. Like literally, it wasn't part of the decision-making matrix. And obviously there were at times, apologies again to Julie Christie, that became sort of errors or issues. But I think it encouraged a sense of, let's be where other people aren't, and I think that persists to this day. To be honest, like we as editor Mad and you Toby, we often would sort of look out at the world, and often even if people were sort of starting to do stuff like us, that was often a signal like we needed to move on.
There was also the rise of the social justice warrior as an idea, which was not something that I knew about. And to be clear, I don't subscribe to that term or think that's cool or anything. But I remember being called that for the first time and being like, what the hell is that? Someone's like, how do you feel about being a social justice warrior now? And I was like, well, I was just writing what I thought about something. And I think it was such a different time on the internet as well. The kind of hot take culture was really at its apex. And I think feminist voices were really rising. It was pre-Me Too. There was all that stuff kind of building. And I think, those voices weren't also really being heard anywhere else either.
Were there any writers, particularly in not right now, who you think would have really thrived at the Spinoff? Were there any writers that you were like, oh, I think they would have a lot of fun here, even if it wasn't even within the realms of possibility that would happen? Were there any sort of particular journalists or writers that you just kind of went, oh, they would be good?
I feel like there was always an essence to people, though. I feel like there's some people here today where I've seen them perhaps at other publications and been like, there's a Spinoff person in the wrong box,
Yeah.
I would not name any names, of course, but I do think that there's a spirit, I think. There is a Spinoff spirit that I think lives in certain people and certain writing that you see elsewhere and you're like, one day.
I mean, what you said before about Twitter, right, was so present in the Spinoff's mind and culture to the point where we were both so into Twitter that we never put our stories on Facebook. At the time, Facebook was just free money. It was so much traffic for literally no dollars. And yet for 9 months, we knew so little about distribution that all we'd do was tweet our stories from the Baby Spinoff account or from our own. And they were like, well, hopefully some people read it. And often they did. But I think for all of us at a period of time, we were extremely on Twitter. And a big part of how we recruited, or, I think you probably commissioned from someone did a good tweet. It's that could be 700 words.
Yeah, totally. And there was also that kind of people who weren't being necessarily used in the way they might be. And I think a couple of examples of those are the Callum Henderson, Hayden Donnell, would now never work that out. If only he was on the radio and I could listen to hear him say that. Anyway, they were both working at the Herald and I think mostly online editors and very, so you kind of moneyballed at Duncan and then we were home.
We also published this week a groupthink piece listing all of our stories that we regret writing. We all submitted a piece. I think everybody sort of knew pretty quickly what their ones were. Hilariously, some former staffers said they had no regrets, and actually they stand by literally everything that they ever wrote.
Is that a true fact?
Yes, that is true.
Imagine resting so easy.
Did somebody actually say that rather than I just can't think of anything? Did anyone actually say?
No, someone did say, oh, had a thought of potentially one, went back and looked, went, actually, no, I think it's fine. Otherwise, can't think of anything I regret.
Someone, what's their name?
You can figure it out by who's not on the list.
I love this blind item.
But all of ours, I think, boil down to being overly confident in what we were writing in different ways, and probably a bit too high and mighty as well for some of us. Just to wrap up, I would say, the Spinoff is 10 this year. I think maybe, actually, go around the table. Do you think it will be 20?
Oh my God. Is it like, we'll make it 10 more years? 10 more years? God, what will it be like? I'm worried because we don't have TikTok.
It'll be all on Vine.
Yeah. There is an old email from Duncan when I embraced the website Vine quite early on and made very short, very blurry clips from the minor party debate, I believe.
Yeah.
And we're having trouble embedding Vines into the site. And Duncan was like, we have to sort this out. Vine is going to be huge for us.
It's a huge part of what we do.
Wrong on the facts, but right on the sort of direction.
The general vibe. So
you were wrong, or you were 20 or 10 years premature.
So yeah, we'll be existing in 10 years' time solely on Vine.
Agree.
To be clear, Vine was Twitter's version of TikTok before there was TikTok, which they famously shut down about a year before TikTok began its arc up. I'll answer the question. There's like zero doubt in my mind. And the reason I feel confident about that is actually sort of in this room, the fact that there are around this table sort of 4 people who have either entitled or performed the function of editor. So you've had generational change there. We've had, 3 different GMs. We're on our second CEO. We've had generational change within commercial, within members. We've got a diversified model, and it just it feels like that whole idea that it would blow away in a strong breeze. It just doesn't feel that way anymore. It feels like part of the fabric of New Zealand, and like it, for its audience and for even the people who despise it, it's sort of there. And so to me, that's one of the signature achievements of our 10 years, is this utterly ludicrous concept that was so flimsy for so long that now has this solidity to it.
On the other side, if you were being completely honest thinking back, how long did you think the spin-off would last when you first came on board?
I don't think I necessarily had a sense of it, but it is absolutely true that I didn't think it would last 10 years. It just seemed impossible because of the way the wind was blowing, and so yeah, kind of miraculous, really.
I also remember, because it was so closely tied to Lightbox, that whenever, I remember there's an email of us going back and forth when Neon launched, and us being like, fuck. And then it's like Netflix streaming's coming. We were like, shit, because we were so tied to Lightbox as our life support that, it felt like if they were going to go, then we would go too.
Yeah, that's a great point. So actually the existential threat kind of thing was never so much about defamation. It was more about often it was like one key commercial relationship. And that's why when COVID came along and we lost almost all our commercial relationships, we thought the jig was up, but then members genuinely came in and saved us. Honestly, I probably thought it was a year, because that was the initial contract, and I thought we'll go through that, and then Lightbox will say, no, we want to do something else, and that would just cave it in, and it would have been a great time. And I'm like, back to freelancing. What about you, Matt?
Because I had no concept of how it began, I don't even think I thought about it as a business. I think I was just like, these people just hanging out, and I guess I'll keep hanging out. I did not have any concept of its business viability.
Not a story to write inside.
No, so I was just kind of like, oh. I think maybe there was a tiny part of me after about a year where I was like, well, I guess I just stay until it shuts down, thinking that was not going to be longer than 4 or 5 years for whatever reason, whether it was just deciding to shut down or I don't know, moving on to something else. So yeah, definitely not 10 years. I would say I definitely wouldn't have pictured this formation at the 10th birthday party.
Well, you both left. You quit. You flounced away.
Oh yeah.
Yes, we did.
and then returned after protracted efforts to woo you back. Did your perception of the Spinoff change when you returned versus when you were there and it was the first kind of extended long-term full-time job beyond projectionism?
Hugely, yeah. I also left, a week before the first
you both
level
did,
4
right?
lockdown was announced. You left
Oh,
right
that's right.
just after it started,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think the Spinoff did fundamentally change throughout that. And so then coming back, I was like, oh, it was kind of, I think it was actually quite nice because I didn't feel like I was coming back and slotting back in. It was like, oh, you're coming back in a new role. There's new people working here. So much has happened that you were not part of. And so it did feel like almost coming back slightly to a new workplace and being able to kind of put on a new skin and come back.
Looks great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. because I do think, and I don't know, maybe you can say no, but I think if we were still there when Toby resigned, do you think we would have had the same offer if we were on staff?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the three of you are the editorial kind of. If you knit the three of you together, that's the best of.
As we have done.
yeah. That's the kind of the God mode of what the Spinoff could be, and of why the Spinoff is as beloved as it is, and like I remember when the pair of you resigned so close together, Toby and I had meetings and we were kind of despairing. We were sort of wondering what the hell. In some ways, it's crazy, right? Like, because the pandemic just changed us so much. I don't feel like we've talked enough about what Toby did to kind of take this scrappy, silly
Seems
organisation.
like those guys were both a little bit scared of a little bit of a pandemic. To
Bugger off I went to work in reality TV. Not interested. But then I got screwed because reality TV was dealing with the pandemic too, and there was nothing to shoot. So it was about 9 months I was out, and then I came crawling back. But it also felt like, for me, I felt like I had crossed a cursed threshold into making television that was like too much of a paradigm shift for me, and I didn't like being on that side of it. I was like, oh no, I'm a watcher and a commentator, and I can't actually deal with making these decisions, especially in reality TV, where you are sometimes kind of playing God with how someone appears on television. I much prefer to play God with how people appear in the written word.
Yeah, I mean, I think I literally would not have been able to do my current job if I had taken it on, having just stayed at the Spinoff. I think it took a sort of separation, seeing how, some other places work and different dynamics, and sort of being able to see the Spinoff from the outside for a little bit, even as I was working like upstairs doing some copywriting and stuff. It's sort of like it would kind of have felt like when you have like an older sibling who is suddenly old enough to babysit, and then you're like, you're not actually in charge though, because yesterday you weren't allowed to and now you are, as opposed to a separate 14-year-old coming in and you're like, oh, you're the boss, of course. So I think it would have felt like that if I had taken it on, having been at the Spinoff. So that little break, and also just frankly not having to be a journalist during the peak of the COVID stuff was probably a real saving grace for me staying in journalism, I think. Okay, well, I think before we sit here for another hour, we will wrap it up here. That was Alex Casey, Duncan Grieve, and Toby Manhire on Behind the Story, and I will be back next week with a single Spinoff writer and a single spin-off yarn. Thanks for listening.
It's our birthday. This month, the Spinoff turns 10, and we wanted to thank you for being part of our story. You're not meant to ask for presents, but if you're not a member, now would be a great time to gift us your support. We cannot overstate how vital support from our readers is, especially as we navigate uncertainty and look at the next 10 years of telling Aotearoa's stories. Donate now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. Rā whānau kia The Spinoff, and here's to many more. The Spinoff Podcast Network.